For 6 years, I wiped my mother's tears, managed her medications, and slept on her couch so she wouldn't be alone at night. My siblings called it sweet, they called it noble. What they never called it was their responsibility. Then Mom died, and at the will reading, my brother slid a piece of paper across the table and smiled. "This is what you actually get," he said. I looked down at the number. Then I looked up and said, "I think you forgot about the contract." His smile disappeared so fast I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. My name is Margaret Collins. I'm 41 years old, and for 6 years of my life, caregiving wasn't something I chose. It was something that slowly became mine by default, the way dishes pile up when nobody else does them. This is the story of how an informal agreement written on notebook paper became the most important legal document in my family's history, and how the siblings who called me the responsible one learned exactly what that responsibility was worth. If you've ever been the one who showed up while everyone else made excuses, stay with me. This one's for you. Mom was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease when I was 34. I remember the exact moment. Sitting in a neurologist's office that smelled like antiseptic and old carpet, watching her hands tremble slightly as she held the paper with her diagnosis. She looked small that day. My mother, who had once managed a household of 5 children with nothing but determination and a wooden spoon, looked genuinely small for the first time in my life. My siblings, 3 of them, David, Karen, and Philip, were in the waiting room. At least, that's where they were supposed to be. By the time I came out to tell them, David was on a work call, Karen was scrolling her phone, and Philip had gone to get coffee and hadn't come back yet. I told them what the doctor said. There was silence. Then David said, "Well, we'll figure something out." He flew home to Seattle 2 days later. Karen said she'd do her part, from Cincinnati. Philip, who lived 40 minutes away, said his schedule was complicated right now. I live 12 minutes from Mom's house. Nobody asked me to be the caregiver. Nobody sat me down and assigned the role. It just happened the way these things always happen in families. Through absence. Someone has to do it, and the person closest, most available, most unable to say no, becomes that someone. Within 3 months, I was driving Mom to every appointment. Within 6 months, I had a key to her house. Within a year, I was sleeping there 3 nights a week because her night tremors had gotten bad enough that she was afraid to be alone in the dark. About 18 months in, things got harder. Mom's condition was progressing faster than the doctors initially predicted. She needed more help, with bathing, with cooking, with the endless paperwork that comes with managing someone's medical care. I had cut my working hours from full-time to part-time. The financial pressure was building quietly, like water behind a dam. One evening, Mom and I were sitting at her kitchen table after dinner. She was having a good day, clear-headed, sharp, almost like her old self. She looked at me for a long time and then said, "Margaret, this isn't fair to you." I told her not to worry about it. She shook her head. "I mean it. You're sacrificing things you can't get back. Time, money, your career." She paused. "I want to make it right." I told her I wasn't doing it for anything in return. And I meant it. But Mom was practical, always had been. She pulled out a yellow legal pad from the kitchen drawer, the same one she used to write grocery lists, and she said, "Let's write it down anyway." What followed was the most unusual conversation of my life. Mom and I, sitting at that kitchen table, discussing what was fair. She wanted to compensate me for the hours, the lost income, the reduced career progression. I kept saying it was too much. She kept saying it wasn't enough. We compromised. By the end of that evening, we had filled 3 pages. It outlined my responsibilities: caregiving hours, transportation, household management, medical coordination, and it outlined compensation, a specific monthly amount to be deducted from the estate, acknowledgement of reduced earning capacity, and a clause that recognized my contribution when the estate was eventually divided. Mom signed it. I signed it. She had it notarized the following Tuesday without telling me, because she wanted to make sure it was real. I folded my copy and put it in a box under my bed. I honestly forgot about it most of the time. It wasn't why I was doing any of it. The next 4.5 years are both the hardest and the most meaningful of my life, and I'm not sure I can fully separate those two things. There were beautiful moments. Sunday mornings when Mom was sharp and funny and we would sit together watching old movies she loved. There were terrible moments. Nights when she didn't recognize me, when she called me by her sister's name, when she cried from frustration at her own body. My siblings visited. Occasionally, David came twice a year, usually around holidays, usually for 3 or 4 days. He was good during those visits, genuinely helpful, emotionally present. But he always left. Karen called regularly, which I appreciated, but phone calls don't bathe someone or help them to the bathroom at 3 a.m. Philip, the one who lived 40 minutes away, managed to visit perhaps once every 2 months, for a few hours at a time. He always had a reason: traffic, work deadlines, his kids' school events. I stopped noting the reasons after the second year. Mom passed away on a Tuesday morning in March. It was quiet, peaceful, which is the best thing you can say about a death. I was holding her hand. I had been there since Sunday, sleeping in the chair beside her bed, because something told me it was close. I called my siblings from the hospital parking lot, standing in the cold, trying to keep my voice steady. David said he'd book a flight. Karen said she was so sorry. Philip said he was on his way. I drove home, sat in my car in my own driveway for 20 minutes, and then went inside and made tea, because I didn't know what else to do. 3 weeks after the funeral, we gathered at the offices of Mom's attorney. The atmosphere was polite but tense in the way that money always makes things tense, even among people who love each other. The will was straightforward. Mom had divided her estate, the house, the savings, the investments, into 4 equal parts, 1/4 each. On the surface, it looked perfectly fair. 4 children, 4 equal shares. David nodded slowly. Karen looked relieved. Philip leaned back in his chair like a man who had just been told good news. Then David slid a piece of paper across the table toward me. It was a printed summary of the estate distribution, each share calculated to the dollar. He tapped his finger on my number. "That's what you're getting," he said. He wasn't cruel about it. He said it the way someone states an obvious fact. I looked at the number. I looked at him. Then I reached into my bag and placed a document on the table. 3 pages, handwritten, signed, notarized. "I think we need to factor this in first," I said. The attorney took the document. His expression changed almost immediately, the careful, neutral expression of a professional giving way to something closer to genuine surprise. He read it slowly. Then he looked up and said, "This is a valid legal agreement. This needs to be honored before the estate is distributed." David's face went through several expressions in quick succession: confusion, then disbelief, then something I hadn't seen from my brother in years. Actual discomfort. Karen asked to see it. She read it quietly, then set it down without speaking. Philip said, "Mom never mentioned this to us." I said, "Mom mentioned it to me." The attorney explained what the document meant in practical terms. The agreement outlined specific compensation owed to me from the estate for 6 years of primary caregiving, reduced income, and direct out-of-pocket expenses. When calculated against the estate's total value, my share was significantly larger than 1/4. Not double, not dramatic, just honest. Just what 6 years of showing up was actually worth when someone finally did the math. David said it didn't seem fair. I almost laughed, not meanly. Just from exhaustion and the particular absurdity of that word coming from that person in that moment. I didn't make a speech. I didn't list every appointment, every sleepless night, every vacation I didn't take, every promotion I didn't chase. I just said, "Mom thought it was fair." She wrote it down. Nobody argued with that. You can argue with a person. It's harder to argue with a dead woman's handwriting. The estate took several months to settle fully. David hired a lawyer briefly. I think more out of shock than genuine objection. Because the lawyer apparently told him within the first conversation that the document was airtight. Karen never said much either way. Philip and I had one difficult conversation that ended without resolution, but also without permanent damage. We are still a family. Strained in some places, like fabric that has been pulled too hard. But still a family. What I received wasn't a windfall. It wasn't revenge. It was acknowledgement. The formal, legal kind that shouldn't have been necessary but was. It was my mother's way of making sure that the invisible work, the 3 a.m. work, the work that nobody photographs or posts about, was counted. I used part of it to return to full-time work in a better position than I'd left. I used part of it to take a trip I'd been postponing for 4 years. And I kept the original document, all 3 yellow legal pad pages, framed in my home office. Not as a trophy, as a reminder. People talk about caregiving like it's a calling, like the reward is spiritual, built into the act itself. And there's truth in that. I wouldn't trade those 6 years. Not the Sunday movies, not the moments of clarity, not even the hard nights. Because all of it was time with my mother that my siblings simply don't have. But here's what I also know. Invisible work is still work. Love is not a reason to be taken advantage of, and sometimes the most important thing you can do for yourself is simply write it down. My mother knew that. She always was the practical one. If you're the one in your family who always shows up, I see you. Do the work because you love them. But protect yourself too. Because love without boundaries doesn't just hurt you. Eventually, it quietly disappears. If this story resonated with you, tell me in the comments. Have you ever been the only one who showed up? And if you think caregivers deserve more recognition, hit subscribe. Next week's story is going to hit even closer to home.